It is not a tragedy for a woman to have no money. The tragedy is when she forgets who she is because of it. Many women today measure their value by their bank balance. But your true worth is not printed on paper or calculated in numbers. It resides in the depth of your awareness, the steadiness of your heart, and the direction of your thoughts. You see, when a woman has no money, she stands at the edge of two possibilities. One, where she becomes anxious, dependent, or bitter, and another where she becomes wise, observant, and rooted. The first path is crowded, noisy, and filled with comparison. The second is quieter, but powerful beyond belief. What you choose in this moment, in this season of less, will determine not only the next chapter of your life, but also how you love, how you lead, and how you live. This talk is not about how to make fast money. It is about how to remember your true power, the kind no one can give you and no one can take away. Let us begin there, with stillness, with breath, and with the clarity that you were never poor, only unaware of the wealth that already lived inside you. There is a silent poverty that weighs heavier than an empty wallet, a kind of inner emptiness that whispers to a woman that she has failed simply because she has nothing material to show for her worth. But let us stop here. Let us challenge this belief gently with presence, because the absence of money is not the absence of value. And when a woman finds herself in a place where her resources are limited, it is not the time to panic. It is the time to return. Return to what? To the truth of who she is without the distractions, the labels, and the constant measuring up to others. What is the first form of currency a woman ever possesses? It is not gold, not silver, not the balance in a bank account. It is the clarity of her mind, the quality of her thoughts, the presence she carries in every moment. When everything external is stripped away, what remains is the self. That self is either a source of calm inner wealth or a chaos that consumes. Modern neuroscience has a powerful lesson to offer here. When a person is under stress, especially financial stress, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up. It begins to hijack the mind. Rational thinking declines. Impulsive decisions increase. Fear becomes a filter, and everything, relationships, opportunities, even personal value, is seen through that lens. But the same science also shows that with emotional regulation, with mindfulness, with practiced awareness, the brain's executive center, the prefrontal cortex, re-engages. This is the part of the brain responsible for clear decisions, problem solving, and long-term vision. So consider this: when a woman has no money, but she has awareness, she is already wealthier than she believes. Because her mind is not enslaved to fear, she can see with clarity, and from clarity, she can move, not desperately, but deliberately. There is a story of an older woman in a quiet mountain village. Her name was Anara. She had once been well off, owning a tea house that many travelers loved, but a flood destroyed it all. Her savings vanished with the rising waters. For a while, people pitied her. They expected her to beg, to fall apart, but she did not. Each morning, she rose with the sun and sat in silence for 1 hour. No one knew what she did during that hour, but over time, something changed in the way she walked through the village. She was not wealthy. She had no business, no fine clothes. But her presence grew deeper, more grounded. Eventually, young women began to visit her, asking questions. Not about money, but about life. Anara became the quiet teacher of her town, not because she had more, but because she had found something within herself that even money could not buy. Inner wealth is the foundation. It is the soil from which all external success grows. If the soil is dry, panicked, and depleted, the fruit will be bitter. But if the soil is calm, rooted in stillness and purpose, then even in a season of drought, something powerful begins to grow underground. It is often invisible at first, but it prepares the woman for a kind of abundance that lasts, not a burst of wealth, but a steady flourishing of her being. There is a quiet danger in associating money with identity. Many women grow up being told, directly or subtly, that their security, their power, and even their attractiveness depend on what they possess. So when money is absent, they feel invisible. And when they feel invisible, they start to diminish themselves in relationships. They accept crumbs of affection, tolerate disrespect, or silence their needs, thinking they must earn their right to be loved. But the truth is, this emotional security is a form of wealth that no economic collapse can destroy. A woman who sits in silence and tends to her inner life becomes resilient. She develops the strength to say no to unhealthy connections, even if she is alone. She recognizes that it is not better to be with someone just for financial comfort than it is to walk alone with dignity. In this space of clarity, new energy arises. And energy, personal energy, is the true currency of connection. People are drawn to those who are settled within themselves. A calm woman, a clear woman, is rare. And what is rare is valued. Even in relationships, this principle holds. Emotional energy attracts emotional responses. A woman who meets a man with desperation will often attract control or manipulation. But a woman who shows up with calm presence invites respect. Now consider the second truth that follows naturally from the first. Emotional stability attracts external stability. This is not spiritual idealism. It is practical science. Emotional instability, whether expressed as fear, anger, or anxiety, narrows the brain's ability to see solutions. Opportunities become invisible, but the emotionally grounded person can slow down, can see clearly, can plan rather than panic. This becomes particularly important in relationships. In times of financial pressure, many women begin to see themselves through the lens of their struggle. They wonder, what do I even have to offer? They fear becoming a burden. They stay quiet about their needs. Or they attach themselves to partners who offer financial support but drain their spirit. This is where emotional clarity becomes vital, because the truth is, what you offer in a relationship is not only your resources. It is your wisdom, your awareness, your groundedness. That is the real gift. There was a young woman named Lila. She had been in a long-term relationship with a man who provided everything: house, car, lifestyle. When she lost her job and her own income, she felt useless. Her partner never said it, but she believed it. She started shrinking, saying yes when she meant no, apologizing for her presence. Over time, the relationship turned cold. She could feel it, but she didn't know how to reclaim herself. One evening, she met an older woman in a local library, a woman who dressed modestly and walked with calm steps. They spoke. The older woman asked Lila just one question: what would you still be if everything was taken from you? Layla didn't know how to answer. The silence that followed became the beginning of her journey. Slowly, she began journaling, sitting in stillness, relearning the sound of her own voice. She found a part-time job that paid little, but gave her joy. She smiled more, walked slower, and something shifted in the relationship. Her partner began noticing her again, not because she had money, but because she had presence. Lila had returned to herself, and with that, her world began to respond differently. Emotional stability is attractive, not in the surface sense, but in the energetic sense. When a woman is grounded, she makes others feel grounded. She becomes a safe space, not just for others, but for herself. And from that space, she can build, slowly, intentionally, because wisdom knows that quick success is often followed by quicker downfall. But stability, though slow, builds roots. In Eastern thought, the concept of Te, meaning inner virtue or character, teaches that true power is silent. It doesn't need to be declared. It doesn't shout. It simply radiates. A woman who is emotionally stable radiates this silent strength. She does not argue her value. She does not over-explain her worth. She simply lives it. Even when she has nothing, she walks with a kind of wealth that cannot be bought or borrowed. This type of stability has a direct impact on relationships. When a woman has no money, but she has emotional discipline, she sees clearly who truly values her. She can tell the difference between a person who offers support out of genuine care and one who uses her vulnerability as leverage. She doesn't need to guess because she's not clouded by panic, and because she sees clearly, she can choose wisely. Financial scarcity can reveal emotional scarcity, but it can also reveal emotional maturity. The choice is internal. One woman may respond to lack with self-pity, another with self-awareness. One may run towards someone else to fix it, another may turn inward to grow through it. The outcomes are drastically different, and we must understand emotional stability does not mean suppressing emotions. It means feeling everything fully. Fear, sadness, even frustration, but not being ruled by them. It means having the ability to sit with the discomfort, to breathe through it, and to act from intention rather than impulse. Relationships flourish under this kind of inner governance. Because when a woman is emotionally stable, she creates a foundation of trust, not only with others, but with herself. She stops second guessing every decision. She trusts her timing, her growth, and her process. This trust becomes visible. It's the quiet confidence in her tone, the patience in her pace, the wisdom in her words. In the ancient texts, it is said, "She who masters herself is mightier than she who conquers a city." There is something deeply powerful about a woman who, even in the absence of money, does not lose herself. She does not sell her peace for temporary relief. She chooses to cultivate a life of meaning, not because it is easy, but because it is essential. Emotional stability creates the conditions for miracles, not in the magical sense, but in the grounded sense. When the mind is quiet, the next step becomes visible. When the heart is calm, the right relationships are drawn in. When the spirit is centered, even the smallest opportunities become doorways to transformation. And so, if a woman has no money, but she chooses awareness, if she practices stillness, if she nourishes her emotional well-being, then she is not weak. She is in training. She is learning to master the invisible forces that shape everything visible. And that kind of mastery, once gained, becomes a wealth no one can steal. Let us keep walking from here, gently, with breath, into what comes next. There is a kind of power that comes from not rushing, a kind of quiet strength that belongs to the one who does not react, but responds. In a world that constantly demands a woman's urgency, act now, decide now, prove your worth now. It is rare to find a woman who can sit still with herself. Yet, it is exactly this kind of woman who commands respect without ever raising her voice. When a woman has no money and yet chooses not to panic, she is not weak. She is practicing the most radical form of intelligence, emotional sovereignty. Stillness is often mistaken for passivity. But stillness, in its true sense, is not the absence of action. It is the presence of awareness. It is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. In Eastern philosophy, this is called Wu Wei, translated not as inaction, but as effortless action, action that flows from alignment rather than force. In a relationship, stillness is a superpower. When a woman refrains from reacting impulsively to every word, every shift in energy, every change in circumstance, she becomes unshakable. She gives herself the time to observe, reflect, and choose her response. This doesn't mean she is disconnected. It means she is wise enough to recognize that her energy is sacred, that not every situation deserves her immediacy. that some things need to be felt fully before they are spoken about. There was a woman named Mariam. After losing her job, she found herself in a financial bind. Her partner began making subtle remarks, things like, "Well, I guess I'll be taking care of everything now," or "Maybe you should try harder to find work." It's been weeks. These comments stung. But instead of reacting, instead of snapping back in defense or collapsing in shame, Mariam sat with it. She journaled every word he said. She noted how it made her feel. She watched her own thoughts in response. And then, calmly and without blame, she brought up the conversation. She said, "When you say these things, it affects how I see myself and how I feel in this relationship. Can we speak openly about what's really underneath?" That conversation became a turning point. Not because she fought to win, but because she stayed centered long enough to invite deeper truth. Stillness is strategic. It gives you access to information that rushing will always miss. When the mind is still, you begin to see clearly, not just what others are doing, but why you are feeling what you feel. You begin to notice the patterns, the beliefs that rise, the fear of being a burden, the shame of being seen without financial independence. And when these hidden beliefs come to the surface, they no longer control you from the shadows. You now have the space to work with them consciously. This inner space, this pause before action, is what separates maturity from reactivity. In relationships, it is what allows true communication to arise. Because so often, conflict is not about what is said. It is about the energy underneath what is said. A woman who is reactive might yell or shut down when her partner disappoints her. But a woman who has cultivated stillness asks herself first, what is this emotion trying to show me? Is this about the situation or about an old wound being touched? She sits with the discomfort, she breathes through it, and then she moves, not to blame, not to dominate, but to understand. This depth is rare because it requires patience, it requires trust, and in a society that glorifies instant gratification, it is countercultural. But this is precisely why it is so powerful. When a woman chooses not to chase, whether it's chasing a man, an opportunity, or a solution, she becomes deeply magnetic. Her energy speaks a different language. It says, I am whole, I am enough, I am moving from clarity, not fear. People feel this. They may not understand it, but they feel it, and they respond to it. A woman who is rooted in her stillness changes the emotional temperature of a room. She doesn't need to control others because she is in control of herself. She doesn't need to fix or prove anything because her worth is not up for debate. This doesn't mean she never doubts. It doesn't mean she never worries. It means she has trained herself to sit with doubt without letting it drive her actions. She has made peace with uncertainty. And in that peace, she finds surprising strength. Neuroscience supports this. Studies show that people who practice mindfulness, intentional awareness without judgment, experience changes in the brain structure. The amygdala, responsible for fear and impulsive reaction, becomes less active. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision making and long-term planning, becomes stronger. In other words, stillness is not just spiritual. It is biological. It rewires the brain to make wiser choices, especially under stress. In relationships, this is a game changer. When a woman is centered, she does not get swept away by drama. If someone ghosts her, she doesn't spiral into self-blame. If someone disrespects her, she doesn't tolerate it to keep the peace. Instead, she observes. She notes the pattern. She trusts her inner knowing, and from that trust, she responds. Perhaps by asking a direct question, perhaps by stepping back, perhaps by walking away completely. But whatever action she takes, it is rooted in self-respect, not fear of loss. And that difference changes everything. Consider this. When you are grounded in your energy, you do not need to chase love. You become love. You carry it in your gaze, in your tone, in the way you listen to yourself. You do not beg to be seen. You simply are seen. Because presence is visible. There is a saying from an old Eastern text, when the water is still, the moon reflects perfectly. In the same way, when your mind and emotions are still, you see life clearly. You see people's intentions. You see your own needs. You make decisions from a place of integrity. And because of that, your relationships become more real, not idealized, not controlled, but real. Real relationships are built on clarity, not control, on truth, not performance. And stillness allows for truth to emerge, because truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And only the quiet mind can hear it. There's another layer to this. When a woman becomes still, she no longer feels the need to convince others of her worth. She doesn't compete. She doesn't cling. She doesn't hustle for validation. This is deeply liberating, especially in romantic relationships. When a woman has no money, the temptation to prove her usefulness increases. She may overgive, over-explain, or shrink herself to seem less of a burden. But stillness says, I do not need to become smaller to be accepted. I do not need to over-function to be loved. I only need to be true. And this truth is powerful because it calls forward only what is aligned. When a woman moves with stillness, the wrong people will lose interest. They cannot play games with someone who does not participate, and the right ones. Those who are ready for depth will recognize her value immediately, not because she is perfect, but because she is real. Stillness also enhances discernment. It becomes easier to distinguish between someone who wants you and someone who wants to use you. It becomes clearer who respects you, not just when you are winning, but when you are in transition. And in times of financial hardship, this clarity is a gift. There is a young woman named Sophia who once shared her story in a quiet support circle. She had been engaged to a man who adored her when she was thriving professionally. But after losing her job, things shifted. He became distant, criticized her more. She tried harder to please him, cooking elaborate meals, praising him constantly, avoiding conflict. One day, during meditation, something clicked. She realized she was afraid of being abandoned. That fear was driving her actions. She wasn't acting from love. She was acting from fear. That evening, she chose not to explain herself anymore. She simply showed up as she was, honest, still, and without performance. Within weeks, the engagement ended. It was painful but freeing, because for the first time in years, she felt honest. Stillness doesn't always save relationships, but it always saves the self. It returns you to your center. And from that center, you make decisions that honor your growth. In the stillness, you may also discover that your value was never tied to what you produce, that you are worthy even when you are not earning, that your presence, when aligned, is enough. This is not laziness. It is sacred remembrance. The world does not teach this. It teaches urgency, but relationships built on urgency often burn fast and fade quickly. Relationships built on presence endure because they are not based on performance, but on being. So when a woman has no money and she chooses to rest in awareness instead of rushing into fear, she becomes wise. She sees clearly. She does not grasp. She does not chase. She waits, not passively, but with purpose. She watches. And from that watchful stillness, she chooses her next step, not to escape, but to align. This kind of woman is rare, and rare things are valuable, not because they are flashy, but because they are true. And truth, in a world of noise, becomes magnetic. So if you find yourself in a season of less money, less clarity, less external success, let this be the season of more inner awareness. Let it be the season you do not run. Let it be the season you sit still long enough to hear what life is truly asking of you. Because in the end, what you gain in stillness will carry you through every storm, not by avoiding it, but by teaching you how to walk through it with grace. There is a season in every woman's life when the walls seem to close in, when the resources are low, and when she begins to question her own value. Not because she has changed, but because her circumstances have. This season is often quiet. No loud alarms, no public announcement, just a subtle tightening of the world around her. Bills pile up, opportunities dry out. Friends become busy, and the mirror begins to reflect not just her face, but her fears. This is the time when the soul is being asked to awaken. Scarcity, especially financial scarcity, is one of life's most misunderstood teachers. Many perceive it as punishment, failure, or a sign that they are somehow behind. But what if scarcity is none of these things? What if it is a mirror? Not to shame you, but to show you, not to strip you of your power, but to reveal it in a new way. When a woman has no money, she often believes she has nothing. But there is a distinction between having nothing and being nothing. That difference is the space where transformation begins. Scarcity is the ground upon which either desperation or clarity will rise. Desperation clouds your vision. Clarity opens your eyes. In relationships, this tension is felt even more intensely because we tend to measure our worth in partnerships by what we can offer, what we can contribute. When a woman can no longer bring financial ease into a relationship, she may start to feel she brings less value. She may become quieter, more agreeable, more hesitant to express her needs. She may accept behavior that previously she would have questioned. She may smile when she wants to cry, give when she wants to rest, and tolerate when she needs to walk away. But something begins to happen when she no longer runs from scarcity, when she sits with it, looks it in the eye, and begins to ask, what is this really showing me? There was once a woman named Amel who had built a small business over 5 years. It sustained her, gave her a sense of pride, gave her independence. When the market shifted and she lost her client base, her income vanished within 3 months. Her savings were enough to survive, but not to sustain the lifestyle she had created. Her partner at the time, though supportive at first, began to shift. He didn't speak it outright, but his silence became a language of judgment. His warmth cooled, and Amel began to overcompensate, cooking elaborate meals, avoiding conflict, smiling through anxiety. She hoped that if she showed him she could still be valuable without income, the relationship would remain strong. But one evening, as she sat alone in her room, she realized something. She had not lost him. She had lost herself. Scarcity had not taken her money. It had taken her voice. And in that quiet, a strange strength rose. She didn't confront him that night. She didn't pack her bags. She did something much simpler. She began writing. Every morning, before sunrise, she would write 1 page, not about him, not about money, but about herself, who she was, what she valued, what she feared, and what she had forgotten. Within weeks, her clarity returned. Her thoughts grew sharper, her emotions less reactive, and slowly a truth emerged. The relationship was not failing because of her lack of money. It was failing because she had started performing instead of connecting. Scarcity does not destroy relationships. Pretending does. And it is often in the attempt to avoid looking poor, weak, or unworthy that we begin to play roles that separate us from our authentic self. In trying not to lose others, we lose ourselves. The truth is, scarcity as a woman, who are you without your roles, without your job title, without your income, without the external forms of power? If that question terrifies you, good, that means it's the right question. From a psychological perspective, what we resist becomes stronger. Avoidance amplifies anxiety, but presence diminishes its grip. When a woman stops avoiding her current reality and begins to meet it with honesty, the energy shifts. She stops spending emotional energy on denial, which frees her up to make meaningful change. Financial scarcity can be a crucible for identity. It strips away illusions and leaves only what is real. This is not cruel. It is clarifying, and clarity is the birthplace of power. There is another layer. Scarcity reveals patterns, emotional patterns, mental habits, family conditioning. If, as a child, a woman watched her mother beg, tolerate emotional abuse, or tie her worth to being useful, then it is likely that, in moments of scarcity, she will unconsciously repeat that script. She might stay in a relationship not out of love, but out of the inherited belief that being provided for means you must endure whatever comes with it. But this moment, this financial low, is an invitation to examine those inherited stories, to ask, whose voice am I obeying? Whose fear am I carrying? Whose dream did I internalize without question? Neuroscience tells us that these patterns are not fixed. The brain is plastic. It changes, but change requires awareness, and awareness begins with slowing down, not rushing into solutions, not distracting with noise, but sitting, feeling, seeing. One afternoon, a woman in her 60s named Noura shared something with her daughter. Noura had never worked. Her husband had always handled the finances. After he passed away, she realized she didn't even know how to access their bank account. She felt helpless, small. But one day, while searching through old documents, she found a letter she had written to herself when she was 20. It spoke of dreams, travel, writing, teaching, none of which she had pursued. Tears fell, not from regret, but from recognition. That night, Noura made a decision. She would learn one thing at a time. First, how to manage her bills. Then how to cook for one. Then how to write again. Scarcity had not stolen her life. It had revealed where she had outsourced it. For decades, she had survived. But now, for the first time, she felt alive. Not because she gained money, but because she reclaimed herself. When a woman sees scarcity as a season, not a sentence, everything changes. She stops defining herself by what she lacks. She starts recognizing the richness of what she already carries. Her courage, her resilience, her intuition, her capacity to love even in pain, her ability to rise again and again even when no one is watching. In relationships, this shift is profound. She no longer clings. She no longer justifies mistreatment. She no longer trades dignity for temporary shelter. Instead, she stands, sometimes silently, sometimes trembling, but standing nonetheless. And from that standing, she learns to speak again, not with volume, but with truth. Scarcity becomes her teacher, a teacher that strips her down, not to shame her, but to show her the power of simplicity, the strength of authenticity, the weight of her own presence. There's a quote often shared in monasteries. When you lose everything, you are free to be anything. This does not mean to glorify poverty, but it means to recognize that sometimes, only in the absence of excess do we see the essentials. And in love, the essentials are what last. A woman who has nothing but herself is not poor. She is in the beginning stages of self-creation. The kind of creation that doesn't depend on applause, that doesn't require a resume, that doesn't shrink in the face of rejection. She becomes a presence. She walks differently. Not with arrogance, but with depth, not with desperation, but with dignity. And she begins to draw in people who do not need to be impressed, only met. People who see value not in status, but in spirit. Scarcity has a way of clarifying what love actually is. When the comfort is gone, when the trips stop, when the meals are simple, what remains? Who stays? Who listens without fixing? Who sees you even when the shine fades? It is in this space that real love is born, because it is chosen, not bought. And so, if you are in that space now, where money is tight, where options feel few, where identity feels shaken, remember this is not the end. This is the forge. And what emerges from it is not a victim, but a woman who sees with new eyes, who walks with steady steps, who speaks with earned wisdom. Scarcity may test your relationships, but it will also reveal which ones are sacred. Scarcity may challenge your view of self, but it will also burn away what is false. And when the flame of scarcity dies down, you will still be standing, not empty, but refined, not broken, but reborn, ready, perhaps, not to return to who you were, but to become who you were always meant to be. A woman's relationship with herself is the foundation upon which every other relationship stands. It is not simply a private matter or an inner dialogue. It is the silent architecture of her entire emotional world. It determines what she tolerates, what she invites, and what she believes she deserves. When a woman does not believe she is valuable, she will unconsciously align herself with people who reflect that belief. Not because she lacks intelligence, but because the unconscious mind always seeks familiarity. We are drawn not to what is healthy, but to what feels familiar. And if self-neglect is familiar, if self-rejection is a thread woven into her history, then love, even when it arrives, may be pushed away or distorted until it fits her internal image. So many women walk into relationships hungry for validation, hoping that someone else will finally reflect back the worth they've never claimed for themselves. This yearning is not weakness, it is deeply human. But when the hunger is too strong, it often leads to emotional starvation. Because no matter how much affection or attention is given, it cannot fill a void that was never meant to be filled by another. There is a subtle yet devastating pattern that begins when a woman connects her worth to her finances. She begins to believe that when she has money, she is confident, desirable, worthy of love and respect. But when the money disappears, her confidence slips through her fingers like water. She looks at herself differently in the mirror. She apologizes more. She becomes smaller in rooms where she used to stand tall. And worst of all, she starts to accept treatment that she would have once rejected. This is why the internal voice must be examined. Because the way a woman speaks to herself when no one else is listening determines how she allows others to speak to her. When she is alone with her silence, does she offer herself compassion, or does she whisper criticism? Does she extend understanding, or does she replay every mistake? These inner patterns become external dynamics. If she constantly tells herself she is unworthy without money, she will attract people who confirm that belief, not because she wants to suffer, but because she has not yet recognized that her energy teaches others how to treat her. Energy is not something mystical. It is something that speaks before words do. It's the posture of the body, the tone in the voice, the way the eyes meet or avoid contact, the confidence or hesitation in setting a boundary. People feel it. They may not consciously analyze it, but they sense it, and they respond accordingly. There was a young woman named Amina who worked as a therapist. For years, she helped others uncover their emotional patterns and heal deep wounds. But after leaving her job due to burnout and experiencing financial strain, something shifted inside her. She stopped trusting her intuition. She entered a relationship with a man who, while charming on the surface, never truly respected her time or boundaries. He would cancel plans last minute, borrow money without returning it, and subtly undermine her opinions. Amina, despite her training, found herself excusing his behavior. "He's just stressed," she'd say. Or, "I don't want to seem difficult." It wasn't until a friend asked her a piercing question that she paused. "Would you let your clients accept this? Then, why do you?" That night, she sat in silence, not as a therapist, but as a woman who had forgotten herself. She wrote a letter. not to him, but to her younger self. In it, she apologized for every time she silenced her needs to keep someone else comfortable. She apologized for every time she mistook neglect for patience, and every time she stayed longer than she should have just to avoid the pain of starting over. That letter marked a turning point, not because she confronted him immediately, but because she reconnected to herself. Within a month, she ended the relationship, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She had remembered who she was. This remembering is essential because relationships are never just about two people. They are about the internal landscapes each person carries. If a woman's inner landscape is barren, marked by criticism, insecurity, and scarcity, then she will walk into love without roots. She will cling when she should release. She will stay silent when she should speak. She will try to earn what should have been freely given. But when her inner world is rich, when she has cultivated a deep sense of self-worth that is not tied to her income, her appearance, or her ability to please, then everything changes. She no longer fears being alone because her own company is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary. She does not accept love with conditions because she knows her heart is not a bargain to be negotiated. And she does not stay in relationships that drain her spirit just to avoid the discomfort of being single. There is an old Eastern saying, "The way you speak to yourself becomes the way the world speaks to you." This is not philosophy. It is observable truth. If a woman looks in the mirror and sees lack, unworthiness, or failure, she carries that into every interaction. She apologizes for existing. She tiptoes around her desires. She over-explains her boundaries, hoping to soften their impact. But if she looks in the mirror and sees someone in process, someone worthy despite the mess, someone learning and growing through the fire, then she speaks with different energy. She doesn't need to dominate a room to feel powerful. Her stillness becomes her authority. Her humility becomes her strength. Her honesty becomes her magnetism. This type of woman attracts relationships that mirror her self-respect. Partners who listen because she listens to herself. Friends who honor her boundaries because she honors them first. And even in moments of conflict or misunderstanding, the foundation remains strong because she does not seek to be rescued.